to $2,000. That's at BetUS using the promo code YouTube150. Bryce, how are things going?
Good, Dan. How are you?
I'm excellent. Let's get right into it. First of all, the biggest question I think on everyone about the action green.
Yeah, the action green. I'm not a fan of full action green. So the pants, I love the action green top with the blue pants. That's been my one of my favorite combos they've come out with over the years. Really truly enjoyed it. But yeah, there's too much green for me in some aspects where I'm like, okay, this is a little hard on the eyes, especially with all the HD TVs we see now and stuff like that. So I'm excited that they're coming out with them, especially in prime time. We've got a pretty good record in them, but it'll be an interesting advantage, I think, maybe for Seattle with the neon green.
Yeah, interestingly enough, and we didn't work this out ahead of time. We both decided to represent with the hats. It's been going around. I've seen on Twitter all week long in Blue Sky that the Seahawks are 5-1 in their action green. But if you Google it, like it's 5-2. I'm just not sure. I haven't been able to find the actual which games they were. But yeah, they've had success in them. They're kind of the only team that's hung on to the color rush thing. That's where these were born. Was that whole Thursday Night Football color rush thing, which sometimes was obnoxious when you saw the two teams going head to head. But they're the only ones that have hung on to it. Really, I agree with you. I like it better with the blue pants, but I'm fine with it. Also, some people get really mad about it, like really legit angry. I worry about them. I'm not sure that's a healthy thing to get upset about, but under the lights, biggest, it's the biggest stage possible. The players like wearing them. That's why they end up going with them. They wouldn't if they didn't. How do you feel about this team at this stage now, after kind of the evolution we've seen through 12 games? Are they ready for this?
I think they are. We had our show yesterday and we kind of got talking about, this team, where they're at. Obviously the nickname that's come out with this defense currently, the death zone, which has kind of caused its own kind of waves within the fan base on who like it and who doesn't. I think they are ready for this. And it was something, I don't know if you saw the mural at the Seahawk headquarters that Mike McDonald alluded to in his press conference, where we want to be, or basically they want to be a team that teams don't want to play against. Like that's their mantra. That's their thing. And he said that this is our opportunity to become that team. This is the first time in a while I look at this Seahawks team and they're playing a team that's, as good, one of the NFC top teams. You could throw them in that conversation with Detroit and Green Bay and in Minnesota, Green Bay, Philadelphia. Like they're in that conversation. This could really set Seattle ahead of where they were in this transition we thought they were. Like they're farther ahead than I thought they were going to be this year at points. After that losing streak, I kind of thought, okay, let's temper this back. You and me talked about that. But I got a sneaky feeling this team's ready.
I do too. I don't want to, give away the ending, but yeah, I do too. And it's remarkable. I don't think I ever remember seeing a team come together quite like this from as low as they were. We saw, it was kind of a mark of those Pete Carroll teams, especially from sort of the end of the back-to-back Super Bowl run to the end of his career here, where a lot of poor starts, and we'd see teams get better as the year goes along. I was thinking this week about, looking back over some games that reminded me build-up wise. This one I remembered, and I didn't look it up. I want to say maybe it was 18 or 19, where they played the Chiefs at home late in the year. It was kind of a crucial game. The Chiefs were flying high, and the Seahawks beat them in a game that it kind of came as a surprise how they matched up with them physically. That was the game. It was the first time I'd ever heard the term big nickel, where we used a safety on Travis Kelce, kind of took him away, and I remember the atmosphere of that game was like, man, none of us really thought we were as good as the Chiefs, but we rose up and beat them. Now, I don't think that's the case here. And we're going to compare the rosters here in just a second. This is a very good Packers team, but I put on the game and watched them play the Lions on Thursday night. A very good Lions team, a team that I think is going to win the Super Bowl. And they hung with them. And so I thought I was going to expect, I was a little worried about watching the replay because I thought I might come away from it feeling a little hesitant about Sunday. I didn't. They don't do anything great. They're a very, very good team in just about all aspects. They're not elite in every one area. They don't really have a lot of players that scare me. They're just very well coached. They have a very good young quarterback. But they don't.
Yeah, when I kind of look at this team and I look at that, I rewatched that game actually versus Detroit, and I got to remember too when I was watching, I was like, yeah, we were missing a lot of guys. Like I think Byron Murphy was out that game, Leonard Williams, and
The whole
the defense.
Yeah,
like basically everyone was out, and we hung with them. And the offense at that point in the year was carrying us more than our defense was. When I look at this team, I get a lot of vibes to 2011, and a lot of people have said 2012 because how well we've been doing lately. But for me, like really 2011 stands out because that team was up and down that first half of the year. They really were with Forrest Jackson, was coming off their 7-9 playoff win. And it really kind of was that second half, that Philadelphia game, the game against Baltimore, where they kind of started to find their defensive identity. And you started to see the Richard Shermans and the Cam Chancellors and some of these guys really start to gel together as a unit. And that's kind of for me, like I look at the 2011 season and I go, okay, that team missed the playoffs, but they set themselves up. This team's farther along because you have, I think, better pieces on offense than we did back then. But I look at like the Ernest Jones acquisition, the attitude, the swagger that now this defense is carrying themselves. And like you alluded to, post LOB, we haven't really had that with this team. Like Jamal Adams tried to bring it a little bit. But it never really got to the point where it is now. Like you look at Witherspoon and, the way the guys talk about this defense and how they're all like just kind of in sync. Even the offense. Gino even said, I think in his press conference the other day, how this is the most fun he's had with the team and everybody feels like they care about everybody.
Yeah.
And that was something that was really famous with the LOB was how much they all cared. And, we obviously found about the eroding stuff afterwards. But this team, like you can see the genuine care for each other and each side of the ball and like picking each other up. And I think it just lends to maybe the way Mike Macdonald has got his message across. And maybe it's hit sooner than some people think with a first-year head coach. But this team is really bought into what he says. And you listen to Abe Lucas and some of these other players talk. They've really, really bought into Mike Macdonald. And I think it's changed the trajectory of how this program was going to be built to begin with.
I want to touch on that messaging aspect in just a second, but I wanted to put this up here. Matthew McGiveron says, got to be something more creative we can come up with. I'll talk about Death Zone in the comments right now. The players came up with this, right? Keep that in mind. This wasn't like Legion of Boom was created by a couple of local radio hosts who were actively trying to come up with a name for that defense in that secondary. This one is from the players. So like it or not, it's here to stay because it's that I think they're playing so well. Like they've sort of on their own account come up with this identity. And you're right. I think the thing that's so fun about watching this defense right now is, and you hear Mike Macdonald use this terminology, you feel them. He talks about it in terms of individuals. You really feel Devin Witherspoon over the last 4 games. You feel Leonard Williams' presence. You feel Ernest Jones, certainly. You feel Julian Love. I think you feel this defense. And the reason I have so much confidence in what they're going to do moving forward, and honestly, I'll just say it right now, I think they're going to end up winning the division. I really do. And it's because, yeah, we have some issues on offense and we'll get into some of that, but this defense is playing at a level that's legitimate, sustainable. You see it all working together. They're completely healthy. I mean, I should knock on some wood, but they're remarkably healthy for this time of year. They just get Uchenna Nwosu back. He's going to be even stronger this week, his second week back. You watch them on tape and you see the back end and the front end all working in symphony. It's all working the way it's supposed to. You see players immediately knowing their assignments, knowing where to go, going there immediately. There's no hesitation. We're not seeing busted coverages, although Coach McDonald said that the Kobe Bryant pick in Arizona actually came off a busted coverage. And if you look over the middle of the field, there are 2 guys that kind of take the same guy, but we're not seeing that very often. And that, if you play that kind of defense week in, week out, it gives you a chance. It gives you a chance to win. And yeah, it's exciting because 6 weeks ago, like I said in the open, I thought this game might have a chance to get flexed out because that looked like a team that could not compete defensively against anyone. I think you touched on it already, but to me, the key was the linebackers, as you mentioned. We heard a lot of talk early in the year about guys trying to do too much, right? Guys trying to take more than just their gap. It was because they didn't trust. I think without throwing guys under the bus, I think they couldn't trust those linebackers for the most part. That was 90% of it. Now they can. It's freeing everybody else up to be able to fly around to the football. And I can't wait to see. This is what I love about this Mike Macdonald defense that we're seeing. Haven't felt this way in a while. Cannot wait to see what the plan is for Jordan Love and the Packers on Sunday because it's different every week.
Yeah, and you talk about the linebackers, Dan, and you think about when we had Pete Carroll here. He loved having certain safeties. He had Cam, he had Earl, he had Lawyer Malloy when he initially showed up. They went out and got Quandre Diggs and and Jamal Adams. He had a certain type of set of safeties he needed to have his defense function the way he wanted it to. Now, obviously, coming off Earl and Cam, it got a little bit more difficult going forward, but it's the same for Mike Macdonald. His defense runs through his linebackers, and especially with the way they simulate their pressures because they don't blitz a lot, right? But they want to give you that kind of, thought process that they are and, drop guys, have guys come. You need to have linebackers that are extremely intelligent, understand. I'm not saying Dotson and Baker weren't, but also understand what the defense is doing. And a big reason I think you can see the difference is Ernest Jones' interception versus Arizona. He drops the opposite way, and you can see it's his film study with Mike Macdonald and probably saying, hey, look, if they come out in this formation, they run this concept, Harrison's going to come across, and that's where Kyler wants to go with the ball. They've killed X amount of teams with this. Drop the opposite, be aware that that's coming, and then flip your hips and attack the ball. That's something that not all linebackers can do. That's something that comes from a guy.
Elite.
And exactly, it's elite. And this speaks to why Bobby Wagner, when he was with the Rams, spoke so highly of Ernest Jones, why Aaron Donald spoke so highly of Ernest Jones, is they could see that ability in that kid or that young man. And now you see that we've gotten him here, and he's completely changed the defense. And Tyrese Knight has as well. Like, Tyrese Knight is playing so much better now than he ever did with Dotson. And, I can imagine he's learned some more things throughout the season, but I think Jones has had a huge impact on how those two operate together, and it just makes it a lot more fun to watch. It's freed up a lot of the D-line to do a lot of different things. Robertson Harris, he's been a huge addition. And, people worried, like on our show, people were saying Byron Murphy, he's not putting up the stats. Well, he's taken on double teams. He's playing kind of out of position in some of these sets because they don't have something that you and me both want them to get, which is a true nose tackle.
Yeah.
So, overall with this defense, though, like I think it's being interesting to see how Macdonald attacks Love, considering how bad he is against the blitz. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they blitz a little bit more tomorrow night.
So that was my next question. I want to ask you. So for those of you who don't know, Bryce Coots played quarterback in college, coaches quarterbacks, offensive coordinator, runs a quarterback academy. That's his thing, right? And that's his area of specialty. So I wanted to ask this to you in two ways, I guess. First, just give me your thoughts on where you think Jordan Love is in his development. We saw the elite second half last year where he really, it was like everything clicked and he was unbelievable the second half of last season. Wasn't that great the first half of the season. I think a lot of that can be attributed to the knee injury. Even when he came back, he didn't look like the same guy. Certainly wasn't as mobile for a little while. Looks like he's healthy now. And so it seems like those pressure numbers are trending back a little bit more towards positive now that he can move around a little bit more. But where are you at with just Jordan Love's development and what kind of quarterback he is at this stage of his career?
I think, honestly, when you look at Jordan Love, and this is kind of, last year, obviously, his second half of the season, he was probably playing the best football at the quarterback position down that stretch into the playoffs. They almost knocked off the Niners. But Jordan Love really thrives off of play action in a lot of ways. That really gives him, if he has an effective run game, and Josh Jacobs has been as of late, but when he gets straight out pressure and just straight out dropbacks, I notice with Jordan Love, he tends to lock in on his favorite targets, whether it's, Reed or it may be Kraft occasionally, but he doesn't see the field as clearly. But when he comes off of play action, he does. To me, and this might sound like an interesting take, Jordan Love in a lot of ways is what I thought Geno was going to be when Geno came into the league in New York. If they have similar skill sets, they're mobile enough, they're big, tall guys, they've got rockets for arms. Jordan Love's just been put in a better situation than Geno was. When I look at them now, I think Jordan Love has the ability, and some people may think Jordan Love's a far better quarterback than Geno because he's younger. Sure, I'll give you the age comparison, but Geno is more of what you want to see Jordan Love develop into, especially in this last game against Arizona where Geno was taking the checkdowns. Love still struggles to do that. He still wants to show people he's got a rocket arm, he can fit it into windows, and sometimes it gets him into trouble, especially when the blitz comes. Like, he's got 7 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, and he grades out at like a 63 on PFF against the blitz. That's not a great number shot. And don't get me started on PFF grades. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. So let's do this. So I had you go position group by position group and select who you think had the advantage on the two rosters. I did the same thing. We didn't look at each other's answers in advance. And the position groups that we're going through are the basic ones: quarterback, running backs, pass catchers, tight ends, receivers combined, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, special teams. And then we'll talk about coaching at the end of it. Here's what we came up with. These are our choices. Hold on. Let me go back here. Okay. So position by position, Bryce is on the left. I'm on the right. We start at the top. You were just talking about quarterback. I went with Jordan Love on this one, and it was for two reasons. As I looked at my choices, I thought, am I being too much of a homer on everything? And so it was close, and you just mentioned it, I went with Jordan Love in this case because he's playing. He appears to be an elite level, like top 10, maybe better type quarterback, and he's so much younger and he's still ascending. That's why I went with Love to start on at the quarterback position. Plus, if we're looking at it as a whole position group, if we're really comparing the roster, give me Sam Howell over Malik Willis any day too.
Yeah, so like when you talk about Jordan Love being a top 10 quarterback, there is potential to be there. I'm not ready to put him there. I'd say he's in the top 15, which I would say he's at the lower of that top 15, where Geno Smith is probably at the higher part of that top 15. And especially if I look at this year for an example, if I say the top 5 elite quarterbacks in the NFL, Jordan Love doesn't come into that conversation. It's, Patrick Mahomes, it's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and I'd probably say Justin Herbert fits in there right now, currently, the way he's playing. And then you're kind of into that other 5 quarterbacks. And like, if I'm going off this year alone, I would say Sam Darnold's played better than Jordan Love throughout the entirety of this season. And I would say Geno has as well. Like, Geno has, and the reason I put Geno and the Seahawks over, Geno has the most completions, the most yards. They pass the most on, first down than any team in the NFL. And especially when they're expected to throw, Geno and the Seahawks do it more than anybody.
Yeah.
So Geno's had to make more with kind of a nothing situation where teams know they're going to throw. Jordan Love's had the luxury of not being in that situation. And Jordan Love hasn't played better for a guy that hasn't been in those situations. So that's where, for me, I went with Geno and the Seahawks over Green Bay and Jordan Love, is because I think Geno is playing better football right now, and I think he's a better quarterback than Jordan Love is currently.
Then we go to running backs, and I was a little surprised by your choice here. You went Packers on the strength of Josh Jacobs, I assume. Their depth, don't love their depth. They have 2 undrafted free agents behind Josh Jacobs, and that's kind of what won it out for me. I went with the Seahawks, not just because of who they have at the top, but I think the fact that you can plug Zach Charbonnet in for a Ken Walker, and he can do what he did, 137 yards or 150 something with when you include pass catching and a couple of touchdowns against the Cardinals. I think that kind of gives the Seahawks the edge, but explain your choice of the Packers having the better running back group.
So when I look at the Packers and, the total package here as we were talking about, I know they've got a couple undrafted, free agents behind it. But I also think if healthy, their entire room, you have AJ Dillon to add to that conversation along with Josh Jacobs, which, we talk about Zach Charbonnet being the other part. I would take AJ Dillon over Helani, McIntosh, and even to a point, probably Zach Charbonnet. And that's no slight against Charbonnet. I just think AJ Dillon's adds a bit more oomph to his runs per se. And Josh Jacobs, I think, is a top, 7 running back in the NFL. He, you saw what he did with the Raiders. You've seen what he's done to the Seahawks when he was with the Raiders a few years ago. He can catch the ball out of the backfield well. He, pass pros well. He runs hard. I think, there's a conversation to be had if Ken Walker was healthy. I think you could have more of a conversation on this. But for me, I just look at the top end part of it and I go, Josh Jacobs, like, would I take Josh Jacobs over any of the Seattle running backs? Potentially, yes.
And while we're on this subject, there's a lot of discussion right now because of the performance of Zach Charbonnet against Arizona. Is he a better fit for this offense right now with his running style, with what we've got on this offensive line than Ken Walker is? A healthy Ken Walker?
Yes. And I know it might pain people to hear that. The one thing, if you watched Ken Walker in college at Michigan State, they ran a lot of zone, and Ken Walker is a zone running back. I talked about this yesterday, actually, on our show. He likes to get to the edge, find a kind of a crease, hit it and go and take off. And when you run zone, there's always the counter of having the cut back lane, which we've seen Ken Walker hit. He stops his feet, stutters, and goes back. But the problem is, unless you have a solid unit in front of you that's been together for years, zone blocking can be difficult to execute because you have to trust the guy beside you. You're basically working as one organism across. Now, what's interesting is when I look back at Ryan Grubb's history, you look at Dylan Johnson. Everyone always wants to talk about, 1,200 yards of Dylan Johnson last year at the University of Washington. Dylan Johnson's closer to a Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh running back than he is a Ken Walker. He was 1 foot in the ground, cut, go. That's where Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh, and you saw they went to a gap pull scheme. And what that means is you're literally having your offensive line tee off on people in a sense where your guard pulls, your tackle pulls. And Ryan Grubb kind of talked about how, and I think this is why you didn't see it a lot early in the year until Abe Lucas has now come back, is none of our right tackles had the mentality to do that. Like, you have to be, I'm coming down the line and the first guy I see, I am blowing him out. I'm not stopping. I'm not hesitating. We saw LeMaya do that to one of the Cardinals players, pancaked him completely. You have to have a sense of nasty to you. And Mike Jarrell, I think, is going to be a good tackle. I don't see him being that mentality. I don't see it from Stone Forsythe. Abe Lucas has that nasty. Like, him and LeMay on that right side are a nasty combo.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch.
And that's where I think you're seeing them go. Like last game, they were over almost 70% gap pull duo scheme versus zone, where before they've kind of been 50-50. And I've talked about that being like, it works to an extent if you have the pieces for it. They don't have the pieces for really a zone blocking scheme. Like, Bradford's a bigger guard. He doesn't get to the second level well. Like, LeMaya can, but LeMaya likes to go and hit people. So play into your strength. Charbonnet's also a patient runner. You watch him on that 51-yard touchdown run. He allows LeMaya and Lucas to do their job, and as well as Cross to step down, and then he hits it. He lets everything unfold. Ken sometimes can be too fast for the blocking, and it gets him into trouble. Then you see him dance and stuff. So I think there's an opportunity potentially where, Ken Walker maybe he's not back till the Rams game. They really let him rest and get healthy with that calf. And you're running with Kenny McIntosh and Zach Charbonnet and George Helani. And Kenny Mac, he offers a little bit more twitch than Charbonnet, but he still likes to lower his pads and hit people.
Yeah. Yeah. And he gets into the hole, sticks his nose in there. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's use that as our advantage on this roster, the depth at running back, and not rush Walker back. Anytime I hear calf now, I've just been conditioned over the last 4 or 5 years, ever since Richard Sherman. Every time I hear calf, I think Achilles. If someone's on an injury report with a calf, it's probably an Achilles that they're concerned about. And we've seen guys try to push that and end up tearing it. It's exactly what happened to Rich. ultimately I think it impacted Christian McCaffrey a little bit as well. I want to read something to you that Mookie Alexander, our friend from Field Goals, just tweeted that's apropos with what we're talking about at the moment. He says, Bill Barnwell's argument for picking the Packers over the Seahawks is Seattle hasn't proven it can beat good football teams. And he cites the Seahawks having just one win over a team with a winning record. Okay, fine. Let's see how many Green Bay has. Oh, it's 2. They've only beaten 2 good teams themselves out of their 9. Let's go back to these positional rankings. Again, go on to the pass catchers. No surprise here. I like the collection that the Packers have. They got a bunch of young dudes. Romeo Dubes, Christian Watson, who has trouble staying healthy, but he can stretch the field when he is healthy. Jaden Reed in the slot is outstanding. Loved him at the Senior Bowl. Wanted the Seahawks to draft him. And then Tucker Kraft is a young tight end who's really athletic and can do some good things. Love that group. They just don't have a standout. They don't have a DK Metcalf. They don't have a Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think the conversation now, I don't think it's a debate anymore that JSN has arrived. He's, I think, 6th in the league right now in total yards. He may end up being top 3 or 4 by the end of it. That duo, there aren't many teams in the NFL where if we did this roster exercise where the Seahawks wouldn't win that position group. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I think Seattle's weakest point in that conversation of pass catchers is probably the tight end position, realistically. Just because even though Tyler Lockett hasn't been the Tyler Lockett that we see and we're accustomed to, Tyler Lockett's still better than some teams 2 or 3rd on their team. So I think, the one thing I'll say about Seattle, though, that's given me more optimism with their pass catchers has been AJ Barner. AJ Barner has really impressed me this year. You look at the catch he had against the Cardinals last game where he literally ran over the linebacker / DB that decided to come up and make a tackle and drove him for about 5 yards. From where we were when we were at that, training camp game, Dan, to everyone saying, oh, he's kind of slow, he lumbers around, maybe he's not that great, to what we've seen on the field, AJ Barner to me is going to be tight end 1 next year. There's no question about it. And he has a level of kind of nasty. His blocking's improved. He's kind of an X factor for me in a lot of ways with the Seattle offense right now. And I think Geno is getting more comfortable with them. But overall, like JSN and DK, you have a 1A, 1B situation where the 1A and 1B complement each other so well in where their weaknesses are. JSN's not going to be a physical receiver. That's DK's strength. DK's not going to be a well-rounded route runner. Yeah. That's JSN's strength. They both play off each other. And the way that DK, his strength of attacking a defense is vertical, well, it opens up the horizontal for JSN. JSN's thing, if teams want to key on him and take away the horizontal, then you let DK run over top. Like, you kind of have to basically sit back and hope you play the right thing at the right time to deal with the two of them.
Offensive line, no surprise that we both chose the Packers. Yeah. And this is fascinating. And for those of you who, are out there and you just continue to just pound away at John Schneider doesn't invest enough in the offensive line, and that comment that he made, overdrafted and overpaid, and you have this offseason and throw $25 million Trey Smith and try to get Joe Tooney from the Chiefs, and you have to do all that. The Green Bay Packers are doing this with a bunch of, I won't say no names, but here's their from left to right. They have and yet they're 8th in pass rush win rate right now by ESPN's metric. A bunch of day 2 and day 3 draft picks, no big free agent signings, and yet they've put together a competent offensive line because they've been together now for a couple of years and they're coached up well. I feel like we're finally seeing some progress out of that Seahawks offensive line, and maybe what the Packers are doing is sort of an example of what they can get to.
Yeah, it gives you hope. And the thing for me is, I look at if Abe Lucas can make it through the rest of this year and he gets an offseason where he's not rehabbing an injury, and you get Charles Cross, and this is my thing with Charles Cross, and I know a lot of people may disagree with me on this. I see no rush to pay Charles Cross just yet. Everyone's talking about, oh, we need to give him an extension this offseason. I think you can let him and do the 5th-year option. That's still an option for Charles Cross. He was a first-round pick, number 9 overall. His place since Abe Lucas has actually come back has kind of gone down a little bit. Not drastically, but a little bit, where because teams aren't teeing off on the right side of Seattle's O-line with their best pass rusher when we had Jarrell out there and Stone Forsythe and our revolving door, teams are having to balance it out now, and they have to attack the edges of Seattle's offensive line differently. And I think it's put Charles Cross kind of in a bit of a tougher situation, because for half the season or more so, he was going up against guys that weren't, they're NFL level caliber players, but they weren't the premier guy on someone's side. Like, you think about the Falcons game. How many reps did he take against Matthew Judon? And again, the Falcons' entire D-line is not great. Matthew Judon's their best guy, and he was lined up majority of the time versus our right tackle. Abe Lucas was taking on a guy that's a tier 2 rush. Or sorry, Charles Cross was. That's where you see, I think now Charles Cross is having to kind of get his game back up again, because it's like, okay, I'm going to have to take on some premier guys because Abe's on the right side now, and they can't just take advantage of the fact we don't have a solid right tackle. Yeah. And so that's where I think with Charles Cross, like, I think there's an opportunity where Seattle goes and says, hey, we're going to put you on your 5th-year option, and we're going to play this out over next year. And maybe you see Charles Cross get extended at the end of next season. And they do their extension then. It depends on what they get rid of in the offseason too.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting situation. He won't have the 5th-year option because he was a 3rd rounder. But I would imagine that if they're confident that he's healthy, that, for all the hand-wringing we did the year that we drafted Cross and Lucas, and we saw how good they were as rookies, and we thought, oh, shoot, now they line up, we're going to have to pay him at the same time, right? You're getting Lucas at a discount. He's not going to get top of the league money, even if he hits free agency, because of the concerns of that knee. But yeah, what a game changer that has been. Like, I was cynical all the way up, and I still kind of am. Every week I keep waiting to hear, like, maybe he has a game that he has trouble bouncing back from, but it seems like he's bouncing back just fine. They're managing his practice reps really well. They've got him doing media appearances now and standing behind the podium, which tells me a lot, I think, about what they think about him and how confident they are in his health. I've said this, but a healthy Abe Lucas going into the offseason without any setbacks, being able to have a whole nother offseason, as you said, to continue to rehab and get stronger and get more comfortable and just get to where he doesn't even have to wear a brace or even think about it anymore, would be one of the biggest acquisitions they could make in the offseason. It would be like if we went out and signed a big-time right tackle. That's just been huge. Before we get to the defensive line rankings, somebody had a question for us here, right here. Let's talk specifically about this. What's your guys' opinion on the job Adam Dirty has done in his first year with the team? It's hard to know his exact impact since McDonald calls the defense. I mean, the evidence is pretty strong that he's doing a good job, right? I mean, along that line, you see the performance Leonard Williams is giving. You touched on Byron Murphy. He's not filling up the stat sheet. Daniel Jeremiah this week just went on Seattle 710 and just raved about how much dirty work he's doing. Roy Robinson Harris is another guy. It's a great example doing the dirty work. Your thoughts on Dirty and the job he's doing coaching those guys up?
I honestly think Andre's Dirty's done an amazing job with this D-line. And I think the other thing you're starting to see is that impact in the rotation of that D-line. So like Robertson Harris, those guys that have come in, the impact they're having. Even Jonathan Hankins has gotten a bit better. Like, I was kind of being harsh on him a few weeks ago because I hadn't seen the impact I thought I would see from him in his spot. And so I think there's a case to be made, and Mike McDonald kind of alluded to it jokingly that, they don't want to lose him in the Oscars. I don't know if Andre Dirty will get a head coaching job or a full DC job somewhere else. But I think there's a chance, and this could be interesting, if a team does come to Seattle and say, hey, look, we want Andre Dirty to be our DC, I could see Mike McDonald giving up the play calling to keep him here. And that's something that he wouldn't have somewhere else. Kind of like what the Giants did to us when we were looking at getting Mike Kafka. They said, oh, we'll give you play calling duties, and that changes that. I think there's a chance Seattle may do that. Yeah, exactly. And then didn't call play because, in the summertime, Brian Daboll is going to change that. No, I think there's a chance because, Mike McDonald kind of alluded like in his initial press conference with the Seattle media that, I'm going to call the plays this year.
Yeah.
But he never stated how far that was going to take. And I think if the defense keeps playing this way, I think there's a chance that they may go, okay, you call it, Dirty. I'm going to sit here and I may chime in occasionally, kind of like Pete did a little bit. If it means keeping him here, because I don't think there's a chance that Mike McDonald wants to lose Dirty already.
Yeah, I think it's tough to imagine he'd get a head coaching job this offseason without calling plays. But I loved McDonald's. Was it this week that he commented on? He was asked about the job Dirty's doing on his coach's show.
Yeah.
He said, well, I want to keep him around, so he doesn't do anything. I thought that was great. A little underrated humor from Mike McDonald. Let's get back to these positional rankings. First, we got this. Got to give someone credit for Roderick says, sorry for off topic. Does anyone know if Dan is married? Asking for a friend. Not technically married, but locked down, my friend. Locked down. Happy. I have a wonderful, wonderful partner. So thanks for asking. We're okay with off topic once in a while on these lives, especially. Like, you want to ask us about our food takes or movies, TV shows? Hell, let it roll. One more on the defensive line before we get back to these. Murphy's going to have a game. The interior of their offensive line is the place to attack them. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They are a very solid offensive line in how they work together and just how they execute, right, and how they see things, and they work double teams well, and they work twists and stunts well, but they aren't physically imposing. I mean, I remember looking really hard at Josh Myers coming out of Ohio State a couple of years ago in the draft when we, were looking for centers. And the thing that had him as a day 3 pick as opposed to higher, where he kind of started the draft season being mocked on day 2, was just not a big, stout, physical guy. That'd be interesting to watch. Let's get back to this. All right. So, defensive line, no question, right? Daniel Jeremiah this week said they're the deepest league in the entire league. The Packers have some good players. Rashad Gary's a good player. Kenny Clark has been there forever and is really outstanding. They have a couple of really interesting young guys sort of on their second team that I looked hard at in the draft last year, Lucas Van Ness and Carl Brooks. But hard to compete right now with what the Seahawks are doing up front.
It is. It's really hard to compete with it. And the rotation they've got going, and the way they deploy different guys in different situations, and the fact that, like I said, Robertson Harris, I think, will be on this team going forward. I think they're going to restructure his deal because Mike McDonald has just reaped praise for that guy on how his ability to come into the D-line rotation and do the dirty work, like we talked about with Byron Murphy, but he's allowed them to use Leonard Williams in a different situation. And that's where I think you've seen Leonard Williams play jump, is he's not having to take those early downs against the run as much as he would have normally if they didn't have Robertson Harris.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's one of those kind of guys you have to have. I 100% agree with you. There's no guaranteed money left on the last 2 years of his deal. They'll redo that. And I'll take it a step further. I think Jaron Reed's back on this roster next year too. He's on an expiring deal. He's so important in that locker room. Guys love him so much. He's another guy, doesn't need the stats, does a lot of the dirty work, still playing at a really solid level. I think they bring him back next year too.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that Jaron Reed comes back on a restructured. I think there's a good chance the entire defense comes back, really. Maybe Jonathan Hankins being the exception there because they might go younger at that position through the draft somehow. But I think there's a good chance they bring
Cam Young finally gets healthy and, gives us some return on a 4th round pick.
Yeah, I'm starting to lose faith in Cam Young. I had high hopes, but I am starting to lose faith. I think the other thing that you could see, Seattle doing with that defense maybe is they get a third safety. They, Jenkins and Wallace move on eventually, and you get a third safety that's from the draft. But I definitely see, a good chance they bring back this entire defense in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And that's exciting. You look at how they're playing now and you look ahead to next year, just gives you that base to work on from the beginning of the year. And I think you and I do the same thing. I think with defensive line in Seattle, I include the outside linebackers. Those are edge guys.
Yes.
They play a lot of 5-man fronts. I included them in that group. Linebackers, again, really, really hard to argue with what Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight are doing, but it's just Jones alone that kind of tips this in the Seahawks' favor for me.
Yeah, Jones does for sure. Tyrese Knight. And, I'm going to say Pat O'Connell, what he did in the preseason, he's a solid backup, and so is Drake Thomas. Like, I've seen Drake Thomas come in different situations, whether Jones or Knight needs a break, and there hasn't been a stark drop-off in the defense's play. And I think that's why we saw Drake Thomas, when we were at the Cleveland Brown preseason game, and I said, hey, he's wearing the green dot, and he just got out on the field. They love this guy, and I don't think they're letting him out the door. And you've seen it since then. Even Mike McDonald's talked about how much they like Drake Thomas. So I think their depth also is an advantage to Seattle, where they don't have a stark drop-off in the depth in some respects, where it's extremely noticeable. It might be for a long point, but in a game for a series or here, you might not see it as much.
I'm really interested to see the game on Sunday too, because they have a young linebacker. He's been hurt a lot this week, but he's back this week. Edgerrin Cooper, out of Texas A&M. He was a guy that I studied really, really hard in the draft last year, looking for inside linebackers. He was a guy that I thought was really physical. Just another one of those kind of slightly undersized middle linebackers. But now we have one of those of our own in Ernest Jones, who like he's 245 pounds, but he's closer to 230. Be interesting to see what Cooper gives them. And then secondary, again, especially given, the news yesterday that Jair Alexander is not going to play in this game. When healthy, he's obviously one of the better. Locking someone down one-on-one, he's not going to play in this game. Xavier McKinney has been outstanding coming over in free agency from the New York Giants. He's been great, but they've got a couple of guys at corner that aren't household names. Hard again, just really, really hard to match up with what the Seahawks are doing all across that secondary with Witherspoon, Wolin, and Love, and Kobe Bryant, and the guys that are playing the slot rotating in there as well. That's another position group that it's tough to find other teams that can match up just in total volume of talent across the board.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing for me with the Seattle secondary is we got to think Trey Brown's out this game, and Nehemiah Pritchett's played pretty well. Josh Jobs played pretty well at our other outside corner spot when Witherspoon's not out there when we're in nickel. And then, Rayshawn Jenkins, since he's come back as the third safety, he's been a much better player. Playing down, playing in the box area, matching up with tight ends. I think he's done a much better job. And that's where I kind of look at Seattle and I go, hey, like, you look at the Cardinals game 1 is the first one Jenkins was back when we played them at home, and McBride had a day to himself. Game 2, he didn't, because Jenkins has been back for 2 weeks and got himself reacclimated to the defense. And all of a sudden, Trey McBride wasn't affecting them as much.
Yeah.
I think, Kobe, Love, like, you've got quite the young safety duo back there now. And Kobe Bryant, I think, is finally ascending to where he's going to be, which is going to be one of the better safeties in the NFL. And I think that's where he should have been right out of the gate coming out of college. And he's always been one of my guys. I've been high on Kobe since we drafted him. And for him to finally be, considered one of the better safeties in the NFL at this point in a duo that's considered one of the better ones, it's nice to see.
Yeah, I think Jenkins is another one of those guys. I think his cap hit next year is like $7 million-ish in year 2. I think they might figure out a way to extend that or change that a little bit, get him back at a lower number. And then, you hear the coaching staff rave about Jarek Reed and how he's looked since he's come back from injury. He might have a future there as well. And then special teams, we talked about this kind of being a toss-up before we went live. I just went based on just how solid and dependable Jason Myers has been this year and really throughout most of his career. He had the one shaky season, but he's been really dependable. And then Michael Dixon coming back off an injury that prevented him from even kicking in the second half the week before and was outstanding against the Cardinals. I thought he was a really underrated part of that game, pinning him deep time and time again. And then it looks like maybe they fixed their return game and they're holding on to the football. And prior to that debacle on special teams that they had the week before, their coverage teams were actually pretty good enough to the point that they're one of the few teams in the league that was choosing not to just kick it out of the end zone every time and allowing teams to return it because their average point of starting drives was less than than it would have been kicking it in the end zone. Why'd you go with Green Bay on special teams?
Green Bay, like for me, it was a toss-up. I threw it down almost as a tie in a lot of ways because I just, Jason Myers has been really good. So is Michael Dixon. McManus hasn't been bad for Green Bay. Their coverage unit's been pretty good most of the year. So for me, I kind of just had it as a toss-up, honestly. I had it as a tie, and I kind of put it down on my sheet as color them both in because I think they're equal. They both have things they do better than the other, but nothing drastic where I go like, you think back to those Bears days with Devin Hester when they had their special teams unit, you can always circle that Bears unit as like, that's going to be an X factor in the game. If it came down to it though, and there was a last second field goal, I think there's a better shot. I have faith in Jason Myers to hit it than Brandon McManus.
Yeah, indeed. Let's check over on some of the comments here. Dune Moose says they are ready for prime time. I think that atmosphere on Sunday is going to be as electric as we've seen in 2 full seasons. You and I were texting the other day. I was trying to think of the last time there was a game that was this important at home where there was this much buildup and excitement about. And I actually surprised myself. Like my memory isn't what it used to be. I think a lot of that's by choice. I try to flush things and move on. My hard drive is full sometimes, but it was a last game of the regular season, 2022. They're playing the Rams at home. They had to win it to get in the playoffs. They did. They won it in overtime to get in at 9-8. But I still think this is different. I think I have noticed even during the 4-game home losing streak this year, there's an excitement in this fan base this year. Part of that is just because things are new, and that can be exciting sometimes. I'm seeing more people in their seats at kickoff. That had been a big problem over the last couple of years, to the point that I talked on my show last year about I wish they would stop deferring at home every time they won the toss, because I thought it would be better to start out on offense, give people a chance to get into their seats, because they're not going to be able to crank it up when the team's on defense like we like. That's not the case this year. They're in their seats earlier. Compare and contrast that to the experience I had in Glendale last week, because I went to the game, and my goodness, the stadium was never full. And then I went up to get a beer and use the bathroom at one point, and my buddy's seats were in, shout out to Eric, my buddy's seats were in the club section down there. And so you walk up into the club, right? And there's couches and TVs and bars and everything. There was 400 people. It was packed. They were sitting on couches, watching the game on TV that was happening 50 feet away from them live in their seats that they paid thousands and thousands of dollars for. I thought that was really bizarre. I think Sunday is going to be intense. They've been on the road for a couple of weeks. They've built up all this excitement, the excitement of the opponent. The Packers travel well. There's going to be a ton of Packer fans there. They're going to be trying to make their presence felt. I cannot wait to see what that Sunday night football atmosphere is like on Sunday.
Yeah, I know. I'm jealous. I would love to have gone to this game. I'm going to next week's one versus the Vikings, which I think is going to be as important in a lot of ways for the playoffs. And that Vikings team coming in, like, again, I never would have thought going into the season, like, how crucial these 2 games would have been, because if you think about how that team went and what we went through that losing streak, I thought for sure, okay, these games are going to be really tough. And we've turned that corner now, I think, and going in the right direction. So I'm really excited for tonight or tomorrow night and, next Sunday. But for me, the game, you asked me that question, Dan, and the game that really came back to my mind, where I had the same feeling, where there was a lot on the line, the playoffs were, a potential. Where we finished was going to depend on how we did in the game. It was the 2019, I think, regular season finale against the 49ers at home, where beast mode, we brought him out of retirement because we didn't have a running back, because we had lost Chris Carson and we had lost Rashad Penny, and we brought him and Turbo back. And that game came down to a John Ursua getting tackled on the half-inch line and not clocking the ball properly.
Right. I was going to say Jacob Hollister, but I think that was 20.
Jacob Hollister was the next play because we got pushed back, but we had John Ursua made his one and only in-season regular catch for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
But that's the game to me. The atmosphere there for that game was so intense because it was whoever won this game was going to win the division.
Yeah.
And it was at home, and beast mode had come back. They ran him out of the tunnel. He jumped into the end zone and scored a touchdown. Like, there were so many factors in that game emotionally. And that's where I look at this game and I go, like, there's a lot of things at stake in this game, even though the division may not be on the line currently, but it kind of is, even though we're not playing a divisional opponent. You've got the whole Action Green thing. You've got it being prime time. It's the Packers. I think the record, Drew brought it up on our show. I think the team that's been the home team is won 10 out of there's 10-0 or something. So whoever's been home has won the game. So there's an advantage to Seattle in a way, potentially, is whoever's been the home team's won the game. So it's going to be really interesting.
Johnny A is calling his shot. Love will be sacked 4 times tomorrow, 1 fumble, 1 interception. So we'll chalk that up. I want to mention this too. I want to give a shout out. If you're someone out there that's still looking to get tickets for tomorrow, there's been a lot of talk recently, certainly during that losing streak at home, there was about the number of visiting fans in the stadium. And some of that is just people are passionate about their fans are going to pay whatever they can pay to go see their teams play. With the Packers, you're always going to get a big turnout because they're a legacy team. I mean, there are Packer fans living here in the Seattle area. There are Packer bars here. They're going to have huge get-togethers tonight in anticipation of the game tomorrow. So you can't do anything about some of that. But whatever little effort we can make to try and put a dent in that, as far as making sure that if you have to sell your tickets and you want to make sure that they're not being purchased by a Packer fan, big shout out to Brian Nemhauser from Hawk Blogger and what he's been doing this week. He set up his own spreadsheet where he is taking requests. If people want to sell tickets and trying to match them with Seahawk fans, and he verifies personally that they are Seahawk fans to buy. He's been successful in selling, I think over 100 tickets. If you are looking for tickets or if you have tickets to sell at the last minute, go to Hawk Blogger. I'm sure if you go to his website, there'll be the link and all the information there. Check him out on Twitter. Love that effort. And I wish there was more that teams could do individually, but they've got that Ticketmaster deal. It's all done through the league. I think they're probably contractually bound to not be able to do that, but great effort there. So check that out if that's kind of where you're at on that. I like this one. Dune says, everyone has a plan until they get hit. Jordan Love will feel the Hawks defense literally. Despite the strong O-line of the Packers, Hawks will sack and hit him, affecting his performance. Conversely, the other side of the football, what we saw from that offense last week. You're an offensive coordinator. We saw some different things last week. We saw a lot more of the pulling trap game, as you mentioned. Gino seemed a lot more willing. We saw the quick game come back last week. He was really quick to make the check down, get the ball to Zach Charbonnet, and get the ball to guys in space, despite the fact that he had some of the best pockets that we've seen all year. It was kind of crazy to see him drop back, be able to put his foot in the ground and go through his progressions. We saw the breakdown this week from Dan Orlovsky about how Ryan Grubb is using DK Metcalf as not necessarily a decoy, because he is the first read on a lot of those where he's the only guy on one side. It's 3-by-1 formation, right? I know you've been pretty critical of Ryan Grubb over the last couple of weeks, but how do you feel about this offense and how prepared they are to face the Packers coming out of what you saw in Arizona?
So I kind of walked back my statement on Ryan Grubb to an extent. I've kind of come back and as myself, it was after I had my interview with Greg Bell and we discussed, the Ryan Grubb and certain things. And Greg gave me some insight that I hadn't really thought of. And I thought of it in my own right of coaching and, the ability I have as a coach when I've coached against a certain defensive coordinator for, a few years, and I understand what their tendencies are, how much easier it is to script out the game and how I'm going to call things.
Yeah.
Ryan Grubb doesn't have that luxury. Ryan Grubb is walking into a situation where he isn't familiar with some of the trees of the family defensive coordinators in the NFL, what they like to run. He's adjusting to the hash marks. He's doing a lot of things. And now what you saw, and this is something I talked about yesterday on our show, you think of the first time we played Arizona at home, it was kind of rough in that first half. It was sluggish. We kind of got it going a little bit, but it was sluggish. However, when we played the Niners the second time, our offense moved a little bit better. Yes, it came down to a last-second drive, but we were able to find areas and hit them in their defense. You fast forward to game 2 versus the Cardinals, and our offense took off. He's getting books now. He's getting an understanding of what defensive coordinators like to do, how they want to attack him, what his counter punches are going to be. So when, for me, especially what he's doing with DK, he's using DK in a very similar way to how he used Adunze last year, where he's allowing teams to, if you want to go and double him and bracket him and shade your coverage that way, great. I'm going to have beaters on the other side to handle that. Now, if teams want to go one-on-one, and this is what I was kind of talking about, if teams want to then, cater to JSN because he's eating him alive, and you're going to leave DK open one-on-one, you're going to see those moments like in the Jets game where DK catches the ball down the field or almost catches it, and it's a pass interference call, and you're going to see those things. What I'm seeing from Grub now is I think he's starting to realize, okay, I came in with this idea of how I wanted to run this offense with the pieces on the skill position. I didn't maybe necessarily account for how bad this O-line was going to be and what their strengths were. And I think Scott Huff is a part of it as well in that discussion because they're kind of a tandem thing. I think there is more promise going forward for Ryan Grubb and his understanding, and you can see it in the way he's talking about certain things now than maybe there was initially. And you can see the creativity. He's bringing the checkdowns back to the offense, which is great. 7 of them went to Charbonnet, which is awesome. You're giving Gino an answer to the test. Hey, they cover everything deep. They're in zone. Here, just check it down. Bang, hit it. There you go. Get rid of the ball. Get it out of your hand. So no, I've been in favor. Now, what I will say though, I don't expect there to be a bunch of fireworks in the first half of this Green Bay game. I think it's going to be a bit of a slobber knocker a little bit to start with. We're going to have some ups and downs. And then I think what you'll see is the adjustments from Ryan Grubb in the second half is where you might see Seattle start to really pull away. There's going to be a feeling out process, but I guarantee you that if we were to play Green Bay in the playoffs, different situation all over again. This is where it's going to be interesting when we play the Rams in a couple of weeks, because we did well against the Rams to a point. We had some turnovers that killed us, but Ryan Grubb's going to have a better understanding of what that defensive coordinator wants to do and take away.
Shout out to Packer fans. Always love crossovers. Love when jump fans from either team jumps in. Jimmy says, "Go Pack, go!" Talks about how much speed they have in their wide receiver group. We got a lot of speed, fellas. I like this comment. So a lot of sportsmanship happening in our comments right now. Dizzy chiming in with going to be a great football game tomorrow, Jimmy. So giving him some props. Conditions are not going to be a factor Sunday. Just checking the forecast again because it can change in this area of the country, right? Tomorrow literally is the best forecasted weather in the next 10 days of the 10-day forecast. It's supposed to be mostly sunny during the day. No chance of precipitation. It's going to be clear. It's going to be cold at game time. It's going to be in the mid-30s. Very light winds. Conditions shouldn't be a factor at all, which in the middle of December here in Seattle is a pretty cool thing. I know you have to get going.
I've got a few more minutes, Dan, if needed. I'm good.
Okay. Let's just finish with this. We didn't talk about the coaches when we did our positional breakdown. Matt LaFleur has been there now for what, 8, 9, 10 years? I don't have it in front of me. Obviously Mike Macdonald in his first year as a head coach, he's only got 12 games of doing this. We've seen some good. We've seen some not so good. How do you feel about the coaching staffs and how they're coming into this one?
That's tough. I'm going to go, it's interesting because I look at Matt LaFleur and he comes off that Shanahan-McVay tree. It's something that, he's used a lot in the way they run the ball, especially. But Mike Macdonald kind of has come in and shown a blueprint to slow that offense down. Not necessarily stop it, but slow it down. I think it's going to be a really interesting chess match between those two. The Packers defense, I know Robert Saleh's there. He's supposedly helping out with the offense, but I think he's also giving his ear to the defensive side. I'm more interested in our defense versus their offense than I am our offense versus their defense. I think there's more of a chess match to be had there. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Mike Macdonald pressures Jordan Love, because he said something in his press conference, which was interesting, is someone asked him, do you look at the entirety of a team's season and that's how you game plan to play against them? Or do you look at the recent trends they've been doing? And he kind of, without letting the full cat out of the bag, mentioned, I look at the trends. What have they been doing lately? And usually it's about the last 3 weeks. For me, that was a real kind of insight into how Mike McDonald builds his game plan, because they asked, oh, if this person's in or this person's out, how much does it change your preparation? He's like, it's not. It's the trends I look at. What have they been doing? What have they been doing to combat whatever injuries they've had or whatnot? So I think it's going to be a really interesting chess match. I just don't know if Green Bay, and Green Bay's got talent, I don't know if they have necessarily the right type of talent to handle Seattle for an entirety of the game. And that's the one thing, especially with our D-line and the depth we have on it. I agree, they're fast. Green Bay is a very fast football team. Their receiving core is extremely fast. But I don't know if their O-line can hold up against the D-line rotation and the things that we're going to be bringing at them consistently throughout the game.
On defense, very good against the run, according to ESPN's win rate metrics, 7th in the league in run stop win rate. Just 26th in pressure percentage, though, not getting home to the quarterback as much. But whether or not he's pressured or not, Geno Smith just needs to keep the ball away from Xavier McKinney with 7 interceptions this year. Remarkable season for him. Just yet another. How is Joe Shane keeping his job, which reportedly he is with the New York Giants after what we saw on that offseason Hard Knocks, letting Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley walk in addition to some others? Just remarkable. I don't know how that guy still has a job. Any other X factors for this game on Sunday? Maybe some things we're not thinking about or that might catch us by surprise?
For me, I think AJ Barner could be an X factor. I talked about him a little bit earlier. I think he could be an X factor in the passing game. I think defensively, an X factor for me, and I can't believe I'm naming him as an X factor, is going to be Chenna. Chenna's got a game now back. He's coming back into the fold, I think, a little bit more. He was on Richard Sherman's podcast and kind of like basically alluded to the fact like, hey, I'm an addition now. Like, I haven't been getting the wear and tear on me all year. I'm coming in to help. I think there's a good chance that Chenna could go off. Like, if he's only put in pass rush, situations, and they've been dealing with Hall, who's been just playing like a man on a mission. Like, that dude is, from where we all thought Derek Hall was last year, and we were all kind of like, oh, great, we wasted a second-round pick on potentially a non-impactful edge rusher.
I never thought that.
I didn't, but other people did. Believe me, we both saw it.
Yeah.
To seeing what we have now in him, it's night and day. Like, his whole thing was, oh, he doesn't have that much speed. He is blowing by tackles. Like, in that Cardinals game, he caused 2 of the holding penalties purely on his speed rush off the edge.
Yep.
And so, you add Chenna back to that. It changes that dynamic, especially when Chenna can be more healthy and get used to his game reps. Yeah. It could be a huge thing.
Thanks to Corey for the super thanks. Appreciate you and Bryce's coverage of the team. I look forward to challenge of stopping Jacobs and getting some national respect that the Seahawks deserve. I think the thing that I love the most about this game is that we're playing one of the best teams in the NFC. We're playing a team that's playing well. I know they lost to the Lions, but man, they gave them a game. We're playing a team that's at their best. They're missing Jair, but I've always said I like to play the best. You want to be the best, beat the best, right? And this stretch, some people are kind of, worried about, concerned about, and then we got to turn around and play a really good Vikings team the week after that. Bring it on. I think this team is ready for that challenge. I think the timing is right. A few weeks ago, I wouldn't have said that for sure.
This also has one more feeling to me, Dan, of a game that we, do you remember in 2013 when the Saints came into Seattle and they were 9-2 and it was that big Monday night game and it was the 2 top teams in the NFC at the time. And I'm not saying both the Packers and Seahawks are top 2 teams, but that vibe of like, this is a Titan kind of clash between 2 of the better teams in that conference. You're really having that discussion right now is, the Green Bay, like you said, Green Bay is one of the better teams. Seattle's ascending to be one of the better teams. Like, this could also drastically shape up how the playoffs are going to look with this, win-loss. Even though it doesn't say it, it adds some fuel to the fire if these 2 face each other again in the wild card round.
Things are getting a little spicier in the comments. Jimmy's in there having a good time. He's talking some shit about the defense. You're a top 10 defense. Didn't know your defense was good. Any Pro Bowlers? Where are y'all elite? Check the numbers since like week 8. I think they're number 1 in EPA per play and number 1 in just about every category defensively in the league since that Rams game. Giving up, I think when you take away blocked kicks, punt returns, things like that, 14 points a game on defense, that would lead the league in most years. It's again, as you said, when Mike McDonald was talking about when he scouts other teams, it's what have they done lately? Seahawks defense the last 5 weeks has been arguably the best in the NFL. Let me see. Just want to give some people some props. Dogzilla Monster with a super thanks. Show us that get on the wall before you sign off. The get. What get?
Guitar.
Oh, the guitar. Okay, a little off topic thing. So I have 2. One is just for show. It's a knockoff Sunburst Les Paul, but let me pull this one down. This is my pride and joy. My lady and I are talking about like really slimming down our lives and being able to live a little bit more out of suitcases and being a little more mobile, but this is something I'll never get rid of. So this is Paul Reed Smith Tremonti Signature Edition. So this is designed by Mark Tremonti, founder of Creed, lead guitarist of Creed, Alter Bridge, and also his own solo band Tremonti. And this one is not just a signature edition in that he designed it to his specifications, but I don't know if you can see that on the plate. He actually did autograph it. I've met him several times, and so that's my pride and joy. I don't play it that often anymore, but it's a great guitar. And then I have an acoustic Ovation back there as well that I still strum on occasion. All right, you guys, we gotta wrap this up. Great conversation, great comments, great questions from you all. Sorry I couldn't get to all of them. Oh, here we go. We got a little misfit checking in with some Creed, which finally, I don't know if you're into this, my friend, but I was really pissed that after all these years, and I was at the forefront, I've been saying for years that like a Creed reunion's gonna happen. The bridges have been mended. It makes too much sense. They're all playing at a really high level, sounding, looking better than they ever have. It makes all the sense in the world. And plus, they would make a shit ton of money doing it. They did it, proved me right. And then they didn't come to the Pacific Northwest. They played every other market in the entire country and didn't even come close. They just booked a show for next September. God, I hate the modern concert industry, man. I miss the days growing up. I'm going to show my age here, where they would announce a show about 6 weeks in advance. And even that was like, you couldn't wait. Like 6 weeks seemed 10 years away to see your favorite band. But you'd go down to the local grocery store the day that tickets go on sale. You wait in line. If you were first in line, you got first crack. The lady behind the counter would open like the 3-ring binder and all the seating charts were in page protectors. And she'd go, oh, here's this. Where do you want your seats? And you just point and then they hand you the tickets. And they were like $18. It's not like that anymore. You can't even get good seats anymore unless you're a ticket broker. I hate it. Hate everything about it, but that's for another show.
Yeah, no, man, I understand that for sure. I'm waiting next year for Lincoln Park. That's
we gotta buy tickets a year ahead of time.
Yeah,
which I don't do. I just wait and then I buy them on the second.
Yeah,
just whatever. It's just the way it is. Here's a little shout out for My Own Prison, one of my favorite rock songs ever. Here we go. Dune says they should blast Creed at Lumen Field tomorrow. Absolutely, they should. Why don't they play higher at every game? My goodness.
Here's a question for you, Dan. Who do you think's going to raise the flag tomorrow?
I was going to mention this earlier. It's got to be someone legit. It's got to be a former player or somebody like that. Like this can't be, for all the respect I have for, how they do a lot of like community leaders and things like that do really good work. Tomorrow's not the game for that. You can't have like the local Boy Scout leader or whatever raising the flag tomorrow. It's got to be someone good. It'd be interesting to look at the list and see maybe who hasn't done it or who hasn't done it in a while. Do you have any hunches? Think about wait. I got one. Because think about you talked about how the home team's always won. This is one thing I wanted to touch on, so I'm glad we're getting to it before we wrap this up. This has been one of the most remarkable rivalries, I think, in the league over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, because they're not in the same division. They hadn't been in the same conference up until 2001, but yet how many memorable games have these two teams played against each other, right? There's we want the ball and we're going to score game with Hasselbeck, right? the playoff game going into overtime and getting picked on the route that Alex Bannister ran off or cut off a little bit short. Oh, Bryce is texting me. I think he's frozen. Yep, it looks like he is. All right, well, I know he had to go anyway, so let me just finish that thought and get back into this here. Yeah, it's a remarkable history these two teams have. There's that Hasselbeck game. There's the top of my head, I want to say 2007 or 8. They played the Packers at Lambeau in the playoffs, got out to that quick 14-0 lead. We were the underdogs in that game. That was kind of Brett Favre in his prime. And then it started snowing like crazy, and we end up losing. They score like 40 unanswered. We lose that one. There's obviously the Fail Mary game. There's obviously the NFC Championship game, right, where we were in the big deficit. Russ throws 4 picks, and we come back and win it in overtime to go to the Super Bowl. The overtime deep ball to Jermaine Kearse. Didn't they open against the Packers the year after we won the Super Bowl to kick off the season? There's so many memorable games. I think Sunday has the opportunity to be that again. I think it's going to go down in the fourth quarter. I think it might go down to who has the ball last. I cannot wait. This is what we wanted to happen. When you make a big change like the Seahawks did, you move on from a legendary coach. It better work, right? And it's still really early. Maybe it still won't work. But from where this team was 6 weeks ago to where they are now, heading into this game, giving us the opportunity as fans and content creators, everything else, to be excited about it because we genuinely have reason to believe they're going to compete hard against this team and have a chance to beat one of the NFC's best, put themselves squarely in position to be one of the teams that has a shot to play for the Super Bowl is remarkable. And I just can't wait. The anticipation could not be any higher for this. I will be reacting to this game on Monday. It's just so late on Sunday. By the time I came home from the game, put a show together, even if I did it live, many of you would be either not home yet or wiped out from the game. I mean, we're going to be pre-functioning all day, right? So a bunch of us might be ready to crash when we come home from that game, even after celebrating a win. And so I'll be reacting Monday, be able to soak in McDonald's coach's show, follow up on any injury news, and then kind of start to look ahead for the Vikings game. Sorry about the lack of content this week. It's why I wanted to go live today and get your interaction. Just the other aspect of my life and my full-time career is harder in December than it is all year. It's a real heavy lift, and it's a really, really intense commitment. But plus I went out of town last weekend. That had a lot to do with it as well. So this next week kind of be back on schedule. So look for that reaction show on Monday and then other shows to follow as we get ready for the Vikings and Sam Darnold coming in on the heels of the Packers. If you're going to the game, dress warm, scream loud, bring your best, be in your seats at the beginning of the game. If you have tickets to sell or you want to buy tickets, get a hold of Brian Nemhauser, go to hawkblogger.com and check out what he's got going on there so that you can ensure that Seahawk fans are getting those seats and not Packer fans. And let's have a great time on Sunday Night Football and see if this team is indeed ready for prime time. You like how I tied all that back in at the end? Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring this program. Here, let's get... got to end the right way. Thanks for Bryce coming on. Go over to HawksZone Rundown to their channel. Give them a subscription. They're just on the edge of 1,000 subscriptions. That is a big deal. Let's help them get there. Glad we were able to get all of that in before we lost his connection today. I knew that the internet connection was a little challenging today. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Also Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that thumbs up, the bell button for notification of future episodes. And if you want to support the show in any other way, all those links are down in the description. I'm Dan. Go Hawks, man. Forever and always go Hawks. Thanks for watching.